Hola, and today I want to talk about the Mexican student movement of 1968 and the tragedies that occurred. The movement will end 10 days before the Olympics. The Summer Olympics will be held in Mexico of 1968, so the Mexican government wanted to get rid of any disorder that will occur. Before we start, subscribing and liking will mean a lot. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, please comment down below. I will read them and try to respond to as many as I can. And before we get started, let's talk about the Mexican government.
Now you love the government?
Give me liberty or give me death.
During the early 1900s, Mexicans will have a little revolution and they will get a new government system. So here comes the Institutional Revolutionary Party, also known as the PRI. They will be elected by the Mexicans for their reforms and policies, and then a monopoly will be made. The PRI will have control over the government for 70 years until they lose the president election in 2000. The PRI were liked, but there was still a bad side to it. There were a lot of allegations of corruption, that they will buy voters and even lock up political opponents, which some of those allegations are true. There were still some good politicians during the PRI reign, and not all of them were bad, but the majority were. Alright, so during the 1960s, there were a lot of protests going around the world, and Mexico was no different. They had several protests, like for example, some students protest against a bus because someone died during a bus accident, but there were also other ones like going against the government because they felt like the PRI was repressing them. Repressing will be constantly used by students, and it's just saying that we left oppression and now we're getting reoppressed. So, and in 1968, the president at that time will be Gustavo Diaz Ordaz. And yeah, he was a bit of the embodiment of the PRI's moral standards, basically being harsh to any protesters that get in his way. But in this case, during the Mexican student movement of 1968, in the first half, he will actually be very lenient and doesn't really react much. But in the past, he wasn't afraid to use the military to suppress students. As in 1966, he already did that by sending military to repress the student protests. And in 1968, the Summer Olympics is going to be hosted by Mexico. So President Diaz wants to do anything to ensure that because the committee already tells him that if there's any disorder, it's going to go to Los Angeles. All right, so with that background information, let's get started with the Mexican student movement of 1968, which starts on July 1968. Two schools in Mexico City will have a little football game, but it will end in a fight.
God damn it.
And that fighting will continue to the next day. Then the government will send in the riot police to break up the fight. The police will use excessive force, and from there, students will be enraged and want to go against their government. They already had it a past history that students didn't like the government, and also over in France, a university was already protesting against their government. So the Mexicans were thinking of why not we try that? On July 26th, the students will march down to Zocalo. Zocalo? Sorry, I can't pronounce that correctly. But it is a common place for protesters to meet up. And in Mexico City, it's right next to government buildings, so it's a perfect spot for protesters. While the protesters are marching down, they will be stopped by riot police, so they will march a different direction. And while marching away, they will meet another group, the Mexican Communist Party. So the student protesters and the Mexican Communist Party will join up and will march down, but then eventually start rioting and looting the surrounding places. The protesters will even burn down buses and throw Molotovs around. So the riot police were kind of outnumbered and didn't know how to control the situation. So the next 2 days will be similar. The protesters will throw stuff at the riot police. Riot police will use excessive force, but still not be able to control the situation. So then in July 29, the military will be called. And from there, the military will also use excessive force on the students. So on July 30th, the students will try to hide in universities, and the military, with bazookas, will go in and arrest many of them.
Kaboom!
Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
One of the high schools will actually have its doors blown off with a bazooka and reports that some students died because of that. At the end, the military was now in every school controlling the students and protesters. During the first wave of rioting and protesting, the deaths were at least four, but the highest number could be 48. The Mexican government will accuse the Communist Party for causing this disorder. And because this is the Cold War, the Minister of Interior named Luis, I do not know how to say his last name, will tell the United States that the communists were the ones who were causing disorder in their country.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
And they will constantly give information to the CIA, trying to give them updates of how they're dealing with protesters and so on and so on. But wouldn't really request any help, just telling them that we got these in order so that the Olympics don't pull out from Mexico. The students will make a list of demands, and an example of those demands will be firing the police chief, changing the response of riot police, and releasing detained students. But at the end, only 5 out of 7 demands will be met, and the protesting will still continue. On August 1st, it will be the start of peaceful and organized protests. The head of a university will lead a group of protesters and will be followed by at least 40,000 people. Another group will also form during this time, and it will be led by students from different universities. These will be known as the National Strike Council, also known as the CNH. The CNH will have some disagreements within itself because it's students from different universities. They're not all going to share the same morals and ideas. The only thing that kind of keeps them all together is that they all hate the government at the time. The CNH will actually create little groups that will go around Mexico City spreading their ideas and what they are protesting for, and even collect donations, which were successful that the government of Mexico became a little worried that the group was gaining support. On August 13th, the student protests will continue and they will go to Zocalo again and they will request dialogue with government officials, but the government officials will never show up. So they dispersed and just did little peaceful demonstrations. On August 24th, the Mexican government will intercept a message from Cuba saying that they were going to send arms to Mexico. So the Mexican government didn't really do much. They just tried to arrest anyone that was affiliated with Cuba or the Soviet Union. On August 27th, the protesters will march down to Zocalo again, but this time at least 100,000 people will actually join in the march. And the protesters will attempt to actually camp out in the plaza. They will also remove the Mexican flag and ring the bell, which this caused some division between the protesters, as some of it thinks it was disrespectful. The military will be there, but will be more on guard than anything. They won't actually remove the protesters unless they're trying to camp out. And then the next day, another group of protesters, this time they were more pro-government, joined in, and they will remove the flag that the protesters put up and put back the Mexican flag. And a little conflict will happen between the two groups, but the military will make them disperse. On August, nothing happened. But it just shows that the government is not willing to listen to its people. The people are going to keep on protesting, but the government is not listening. So on to September 1st, the president finally addresses the protests. And what does President Diaz say? He says that he's going to do anything to defend Mexico. And this is kind of a bit of a issue. So government officials think that he is being too soft. Another thing is that the Olympics is going to happen in a month. So the president needs to act quickly to calm down the protests so that the Olympics could continue. Also, while giving his presidential speech, the government will also find dynamite on the electrical power line of Mexico City. So meaning someone was going to sabotage his speech so that no one could hear it. These made the government a little on edge, but nothing really came out of it. Early September, there will be no conflict. There will probably be a little demonstrations, but the military will make them disperse. Like, the military even had a little parade, and there were rumors that they were going to get booed at, but nothing happened. On September 13th, the protesters will have a march called the Silent March. They will put tape in their mouth to represent how the government is keeping them silent. Then out of nowhere, on September 18th, in the afternoon, the Mexican military will go into a university and arrest over 300 students. They will justify by saying that there were Molotov cocktails in it, propaganda from Cuba and China, and even that some students that were arrested didn't attend that university. So these rally up a bunch of protesters, and in September 19th to the 24th, there will be violence and battles between police, military, and protesters. In Tlatelolco, protesters will draw Molotov cocktails at the police and military. The military and police will, of course, fight back using tear gas, rifles, batons, so on and so on. An officer will be killed by an off duty lieutenant because the lieutenant saw that the officer was abusing his power and trying to arrest his mother. And another day, three officers will die because of some students making a homemade bazooka. Another report will be that officers were having a shootout with students in the rooftop with rifles. At the end of these little violent scuffle, at least 40 will be injured, and deaths are unknown other than the three officers or four officers that were mentioned. The Olympics is coming close, and now there's disorder. The government already have people listening in to the protesters, and the CNH leaders plan to attend and schedule a protest on Tlatelolco on October 2nd, 1968. So the government will make a new battalion, known as the Olympia Battalion, and they will be tasked to arrest the CNH leaders during the protest. Also around the plaza will be snipers. So a quick conspiracy is that the Mexican government thought that another group that was protesting was planning to attack with snipers. This group was called the La Limpia Brigade. But then at the same time, later on, well, in the reports, later on, the Mexican government will make a little brigade called Brigada Limpia, which is the same name just in Spanish. So on October 2nd, while the protesters are at the plaza, the military will surround them. The protesters will think everything is fine. They will do their simple chants and other stuff, seeing that the military just around them doing nothing. But the military is secretly creating a perimeter around them. The Olympia Battalion will go into the crowd and will wear white gloves and casual clothing. Reporters were also given permission to record the protest and the detainment of the protesters. So now in Tlatelolco, in the afternoon, there will be a helicopter hovering around. The helicopter is obvious a military, it wasn't part of the news, and it would drop flares. And out of nowhere, gunshots will be heard. No one knows who shot first, but the military will start shooting back. The report for the Mexican military would say that the shot actually came from the third floor, but there's not really real evidence of that other than maybe seeing a soldier look up towards the third floor. Well, there's also reports that officers went into the third floor before the shooting happened. We never know if the government is actually telling the truth or not, especially since the Mexican government here kind of seemed like wanting to make any excuse to arrest these protesters. Chaos erupts and protesters are running away but are being detained or even some of them being shot by the military. And the Olympia Battalion are just either grabbing people or even shooting at them. But there's also reports that the Olympia Battalion was shooting towards the military and that will provoke the military to shoot back. The massacre will have at least 20 deaths, but other reports have been as high as 150 to 400. And news of the event will be scarce, and no one really will talk about it. It is kind of obscured of what really happened, who shot first, why did the government did these, and at the end it will just be another example of how the government is willing to oppress its people. In 1968, President Diaz will address that the military was the one who caused the violence and he takes responsibility for that. But then later on, will blame that the students were violent. It is believed that President Diaz said the first statement so that his Minister of Interior could become president, which will be successful, and then that's when he changed and said that the students were violent. The October 2nd, Tlatelolco Massacre was the end of this Mexican student movement. There will be some protests, but at the end, it wasn't as effective as it was during September and July. The Olympic Games would start 10 days after the massacre, and the only protests that happened during the game were either against Vietnam or the Soviet Union. But other than that, no real mention of the Mexican student movement. The Mexican government will continue to blame Cuba and the Communist Party, but there will never be real evidence to back that up. Even the United States think that the Mexican government was just looking for a scapegoat, and in reality, it was just more of an internal issue. So, of course, there's some conspiracies against the Mexican government during the massacre. They believe that the snipers were sent there to provoke the military, but also their secret battalion also was there to provoke the military. At the end, we will never know who shot first. Another theory is that maybe the protesters actually shot at the military, since the protesters have had a history of violence and even had recently had a gunfight against the officers. The Olympia Battalion is confirmed, as we could see many photos of protesters that were arrested. Behind them will be one of the members with a white glove casually walking near the military. This event will always be remembered by many Mexicans as the time that the Mexican government massacred its own people to suppress them when they were protesting against them. And a quick fact about this event is that the kids that went missing in 2014, the 43 students one, they were actually going to attend an anniversary of this event. Sorry for my bad English, and history is important, so I wanted to share these. My mom brought it up to me, and I was looking it up and seeing like, oh shit, the government did actually made a battalion to, in a sense, arrest its people, but also you could see them. They have little handguns, and some say that they were using their handguns to kill some protesters. At the end, we will never know the true numbers of people that died during that day. I still think it's interesting and think that it should still be preserved. Again, I think history is important to remember. And if I go missing, you know why. Most likely to be here, alright? Nah, just kidding. I have nothing against them. Again, I think that they were a good government, most likely in the beginning, but over time, just corruption kind of came into it. With that, I hope you learned something today. Sorry if I got anything wrong. Please comment down it, and I will probably pin anything that is right. And other than that, I hope you have a good day, and adios.